Welcome to this video. This series is focused on helping you develop and understand the skills needed to attack the blind tasting portion of the WSET Level 3 wine examination. So if you're studying for that, this is a great resource for you to kind of add into your study plan, just so you can hear some tasting notes, because I am an APP that provides tasting examinations for the Level 3, and so I will actually write and grade the papers according to the wines that they send me to use for those exams. And so what I'm going to do today is actually write a tasting note. I'm going to verbalize it to you, but I'm going to give a tasting note how I would write it for an exam wine. Then we'll take a quick break, and I will then have a reveal for the wine and let you know what it is. So let's get started. The wine that I have here today, starting right at the top with appearance, it is clear. There's nothing here that is cloudy. And remember, there really is no mark for noting that it is clear on the examination. In the appearance, there are two marks given. One is for intensity and one is for color. So from an intensity point of view, this is medium. And from a color point of view, it is lemon. It's got kind of like a nice kind of almost golden lemon color, but it is still maintaining a lot of that core of yellow. There isn't really any amber or tawny kind of creeping in around the edges. So I would write this as lemon, okay? Moving on to the nose. Condition, of course, is clean, no points for that, but intensity is medium. This wine is giving me some aromatics on the nose, but it's not jumping out of the glass. So it's not something that I would really kind of rate at a much higher level than just medium. But there are a fair amount of aromatics that I can smell. They're just kind of subdued, medium. All right. This is the point where I want to make sure that Level 3 students don't miss. It's the development mark. This is something that we always put into our nose section, our aromatic section, because the determination of development really is mostly associated with what we have on the nose and the aromatics we pick up on the nose. So this one is youthful. Everything that I'm smelling, and we're going to describe in just a second, really is coming out of the primary section of the tasting lexicon, and I'm not picking up anything secondary that would be associated with wood or malolactic or any of that kind of stuff, and so and certainly no tertiary. So I'm going to stick with primary and call this youthful. What I am smelling, there's sort of hints of going right down the list in my floral category. Cluster, there's acacia and blossom, almost like a little orange blossom. I get a little bit of green fruit. There's an apple, like a green apple kind of quality to this, or pear skin, perhaps. I do get a little bit of lemon flavor, aromatics in the nose, but there's a lot of stone fruit, sort of like underripe white peach, underripe apricot, maybe just a touch of nectarine, kind of leaning into that blossom note that I had a second ago. The thing that I get a bunch of also here, there's not a lot of tropical fruit, but I do get a little bit of pineapple, maybe a little green pineapple, kind of like the pineapple skin when it's trimmed off the regular pineapple. It's got a little bit more of a green herbaceous kind of quality to it. And maybe just a touch of white pepper, not a lot, but maybe just a touch. Wet stones and almost like a lanolin or wet wool kind of quality to this wine as well. So decent amount of stuff going on in the nose, kind of thinking ahead. It's giving me a little bit of a nod to maybe building up some complexity and an argument for complexity. So let's move on to the palate. All right, this wine. So technically, I think this wine is dry, and the dryness, the dryness in the wine gets sort of amplified slightly by the fact that it does have a decent amount of acidity here. So from an acid point of view, I'm going to say medium plus. I don't think there's a lot of sugar here, but I could see somebody, because it has kind of a round feel in the palate, saying that it's a little off dry. I think from my point of view, I think there is a little residual sugar here, but I think it still technically qualifies for dry. So that might be where I would put, just to give the candidate the benefit of the doubt. There might be just a little bit of residual sugar here. So if they did score it off dry, that would count, but I would score it as dry. And like I said, on the acid score, I'm gonna go medium plus, because my mouth is watering. It's not over the top. I get a juiciness. I'm still kind of salivating from it. Alcohol, though, is really not an issue. It's kind of, I would say, on the low side, actually. There's no burn, there's no nothing really kind of coming at me from an attack point of view from the alcohol. So that, coupled with the fact that I have this kind of slight roundness on the palate, sort of leads me to believe that there might be a little bit of residual sugar here. So kind of backing up that off-dry note. Body, straight down the middle, medium. The acid kind of cleans it out. There's no real weight or glycerous kind of quality from alcohol because there isn't a lot of alcohol. Flavor intensity kind of jacks up a little bit on the palate. I got a good amount of flavor, medium plus. And I think there's a lot, like we're going to go back in a second and look at the lexicon. I think there's actually a lot of flavors that are actually here, although the finish doesn't really linger too long. So the finish I'm only giving a medium, but for flavor intensity, medium plus, okay? And on the palate, I still get that blossom. I'm getting a lot of the green apple, a lot of the peach, a lot of the apricot, a little bit of that pineapple kind of quality, and whetstones and lanolin kind of all creep in around there. So I'm getting this kind of complex profile on the palate. Nothing secondary and certainly nothing tertiary. This is definitely a youthful wine that is fresh, and that acidity carries it forward. So putting all that together, kind of thinking about how we're going to call our quality assessment on the conclusion, balance, length, intensity, complexity. We're always going to consider Blick. So from a quality point of view with balance, I think there's actually a lot of balance in this wine. There's acidity, but it's appropriate. There's just a touch of residual sugar that I think kind of helps lift a little bit of the aromatics and the flavor profile. And as I said, the intensity is a medium plus, so I have to give it a little bit of a higher nod towards that intensity. And I ticked off a lot of different descriptors, both on the aromatics and on the flavor palate profile. And so I have to kind of give it a pretty good mark when it comes to the complexity. So I'm giving it strong marks for balance, intensity, decent length. I didn't give it a full mark on length. It was only medium, but what's there is kind of elegant and in its own subtle way comes across quite nicely. So it's a really pleasant drinking wine that fulfills the complexity quotient. And I think the only thing that really kind of falls in the Blick is maybe a little bit about length. But so I'm going very good with this wine. I think it is really well balanced and comes across quite well. And it's also a wine that I think actually could improve with a few years of aging. It is a white wine. We don't do a lot of aging when it comes to white wine, but there are certainly examples that could benefit from a couple years of aging. And so because that acidity is there, because there's sort of this textural kind of component to it that to me is not really wood driven. It's not skin driven. It's actually almost probably more soil driven for me. I think there's some good promise in this wine for a couple more years of aging and sort of development. So I'm going to say that this is a wine that you can drink now, but does have potential for aging. Okay. So take that all in, give it a review for a second, and we'll hit pause and then come back in a minute and we'll talk about what the wine is. All right, so let's reveal the wine. As I said, this wine has good acidity, it's got good freshness. A lot of its flavor, aromatic and flavor kind of components revolve around peach and underripe apricot and whetstone. And then there's also a pretty good amount of acidity here. So we can eliminate a handful of grapes out there and kind of focus down on grapes that have higher acidity, things like Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, Chenin Blanc. These are grapes that really can have those flavor characteristics. Although with Sauvignon Blanc, I think we're going to find that there's maybe a little bit more of the tropical, more of the gooseberry and grapefruit, and a lot more citrus, I think. Here it's pretty kind of subdued and elegant. And as I said, I think there's a fair amount of sort of texture that comes through in this wine from the soil that it's grown in. So this is actually Riesling, and it comes from Germany. It comes from a region called the Pfalz, which is not that far away from Alsace. It's a fairly warm region, relatively flat, or a little bit flatter than, say, the Mosel or the Rheingau. But they do have hills. But just an area that's known for producing absolutely outstanding wine. So this is Scheuermann Riesling 2020. And as I said, it comes from the Pfalz. So pretty interesting wine. It does have a couple years or a year or two of bottle age to it, but I think it could actually go a little longer. Alcohol content is only 11.5. So the alcohol is in the low section, as I said, or the low category, as I said. And I think there's just a touch of residual sugar here. There's not a lot. Be interesting to take a look at the technical note and see what they actually have here. But it's a clean, elegant wine, and you know, giving it a very good review or rating from the quality assessment, I think is appropriate because this wine is extremely well balanced, drinks quite well. It was $22 on the retail shelf, if you care to know, and it comes across as a wine that I think is kind of complete in its approach and drinkability. So right on there with a very good rating. Maybe store it away for a couple of years to see if it improves. Riesling can actually pick up some added complexity with a couple extra years of bottle age, and you probably have a very nice bottle of wine. So Scheuermann Riesling 2020 from the Pfalz region in Germany. Cheers.